I'm not the kind of person who checks his bank account for thrills. I'm 36. I work in compensation operations at a mid-sized software company outside Chicago. And my idea of excitement is a payroll run that closes cleanly on the first pass. I'm the guy who builds the bonus spreadsheets, loads the file into our payroll processor, reconciles the totals, and makes sure the bank funding matches what we told people they earned. Boring work until it isn't. The bonus hit on a Friday night. I was in my kitchen rinsing a coffee mug when my phone buzzed with the bank alert. Deposit, $30,000 in the hour. For a second, I just stared at it, waiting for the app to refresh and correct itself. 30 grand isn't lottery money, but it's enough to make your heart trip once. I didn't jump around. I didn't call anyone. I sat down and opened my laptop because that's what I do when something doesn't look right. I verify it. We were coming off a brutal year. 2 quarters of layoffs, 1 reorg that was really a headcount freeze with better branding, and a CEO who kept using the phrase doing more with less, like it was inspirational instead of threatening. But we'd also landed a huge enterprise renewal in October, and leadership promised retention bonuses for key roles. I wasn't key in the way sales is key. I'm not closing deals or shaking hands in a blazer, but compensation ops touches everything. A mistake in a batch becomes a legal problem fast. In the last year, I'd been working 12-hour days during close, fixing managers' broken spreadsheets and catching errors before they hit bank. So when I saw $30,000, I told myself maybe they finally noticed. Still, policy is policy. I logged into our payroll portal and pulled my own pay statement. Because yes, I'm allowed to see my own record. The line item was clean. Retention bonus, Q4, taxed, withheld, net deposited. No weird adjustments. Then I checked the bonus batch ID in the payroll processor. Same story. My employee ID included, amount approved, status paid, timestamped 7:42 p.m. That should have been the end of it. But I didn't feel relief. I felt watched. Like the money wasn't a gift. Like it was a test. Saturday and Sunday passed in a haze of half celebration and quiet calculation. I didn't spend $1. I didn't even transfer it to savings. I left it exactly where it landed, untouched, like evidence. Monday morning at 8:17, my work email lit up while I was still on the train. Subject: urgent, bonus payment. Correction required. It was from finance operations, not payroll, not HR finance. Hi, Ethan, it started, painfully polite. Our team identified that the $30,000 bonus paid to you on Friday was issued in error due to a processing mistake. Please confirm you will return the funds today. We can provide wire instructions. I read it twice, waiting for the punchline. I hadn't asked for the money. I hadn't moved it. And the way they wrote it, confirm you will return the funds today, wasn't a question. It was a script. Before I could reply, another email came in. Subject: action required, overpayment resolution from HR Shared Services. They didn't call it a bonus mistake. They called it an overpayment. They attached a 1-page form with a blank signature line and a phrase that made my stomach go cold. Failure to comply may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. Then my phone rang. It was my manager, Jared. He ran our compensation systems team, the kind of guy who could sound friendly while he tightened a noose. Hey, Ethan, he said like we were talking about lunch. Got a couple notes from finance. Weird situation. Can you just send it back today? They'll email the instructions. I looked around the train car. People were staring at their own phones, living their own lives. I lowered my voice. Jared, I said, I didn't request that payment. It was in the approved bonus batch. A pause. A smile I could hear through the line. Yeah, he said. It happens. End of year. Mistakes. Just help us clean it up, okay? Help us. He didn't say, we'll investigate. He didn't say, we'll document this properly. He said, help us clean it up. I opened my laptop again, right there between 2 strangers, and started doing what I do best, tracing the trail. First, I pulled the payroll processor audit log. Every change to a batch is recorded. Who uploaded, who approved, who edited, and when. The batch was created by me, as expected. It was approved by our comp manager, Denise, as expected. Then it was approved by finance, someone with treasury authorization. That wasn't unusual. Funding approval always required finance. But the name on the approval line wasn't the controller. It wasn't our usual treasury analyst. It was Mason Kerrigan, VP of Finance. I blinked. Mason doesn't approve payroll batches. He approves budgets, not wires. His name being on that log was like seeing a senator sign a grocery receipt. Still not proof of anything. People cover for each other. Sometimes executives click buttons they don't understand and call it leadership. So I went one step deeper, the funding source. In a normal run, payroll is funded from our operating account, an account in our bank that Treasury uses for payroll. Vendors, rent, everything. In our systems, it shows up with a boring nickname, OP01. But because my job involves reconciliation, I have view-only access to the Treasury dashboard. I can see which account funded which batch. I can't move money. I can't initiate wires. I can only see the ledger and match totals. I open the Treasury portal and search the batch reference number. The result populated instantly. Amount, date, bank file ID, and the source account. For a second, I thought the portal had glitched. I refreshed. Same result. Source. Account. Client. Trust. Hold back. Restricted. I felt my throat tighten like my body understood the problem before my brain finished the sentence. Client trust funds weren't payroll money. They were restricted reserves tied to a specific contract. Money we weren't allowed to touch unless certain conditions were met. The kind of account that exists because lawyers demanded it and auditors check it. And now my bonus had been funded from it. On my screen at the bottom of the transaction details, there was a note field. One line, probably auto-entered when someone created the bank file. Correction sweep. Return to designated account upon confirmation. I stared at it until the words stopped being English. Then a new email came in from Finance Ops, stamped 8:31 a.m. Wire instructions attached. Please return funds today. And I realized something simple, ugly, and very real. If I wired that money back the way they wanted, I wouldn't be fixing a mistake. I'd be helping someone erase a record. By the time I got to my desk, I'd already decided one thing. I wasn't going to return anything outside policy, not because I wanted to keep the money. Honestly, 30 grand that lands wrong feels like a live wire. You don't grab it, you label it, you document it. You make the right people touch it, in the right order, on the record. Because the moment you move money with your own hands, you become part of the story. At 8:47, I replied to Finance Ops with the most boring sentence I could write. Please submit this as an overpayment case through HR payroll workflow, so the return can be processed via standard reversal and confirm the original funding source account for audit purposes. I didn't accuse. I didn't hint. I didn't say the words restricted account. I just forced them toward process. 10 minutes passed. No reply. Then HR called. Not my manager. Not someone I worked with. A generalist voice, professional and empty. Ethan, we need to resolve an overpayment today, she said. Can you confirm you'll return the funds by end of business? Through the standard reversal, yes, I said. A pause. Like I'd used the wrong password. We already sent wire instructions, she said. That's the fastest path. I'm not authorized to decide the path, I said. I'm asking you to open the case so payroll can run the reversal properly. She let out a small breath through her nose, annoyance wrapped in politeness. I understand, she said, but leadership wants this handled today. Leadership. That word wasn't an explanation, it was a warning. At 9:18, Jared stopped by my desk. He didn't sit. He stood in the aisle, hands in pockets, scanning my monitor like he owned it. Hey, he said quietly, finance is freaking out. Can you just send it back? I'll make sure it's documented. That was the moment my irritation turned sharp. Because I'll make sure it's documented from someone like Jared means I'll write the version that protects me. I'm not wiring 30 grand out of my personal account because someone says so. I said, keeping my voice low. If it's an overpayment, we have a process. His jaw tightened. He leaned closer. Ethan, he said, and the friendly tone dropped a fraction. This doesn't have to be complicated. It already was. After he walked away, I did what I always do when something starts smelling like a trap. I created a clean trail. I opened a new folder on my work drive and saved the finance email chain with timestamps, the HR disciplinary action form, screenshots of the Treasury portal showing the source account, the payroll, processor audit log with Mason's name on the approval line, the transaction detail that said correction sweep. Then I wrote down, in plain language, exactly what I'd seen and when I'd seen it. Not a novel, not a rant, a factual timeline. At 9:46, I got a reply from Finance Ops. One sentence. Please use the attached wire instructions. Standard workflow will take too long. Attached was a PDF with routing and account numbers. The destination account name wasn't company operating. It wasn't payroll clearing. It wasn't anything I recognized. It was labeled Kerrigan Holdings Settlement. I stared at it until my eyes started to sting. Maybe it was a vendor account. Maybe it was a bank label error. Maybe it was normal in some bizarre Treasury universe I didn't live in. But here's what I did know. If an overpayment happens, you don't wire money to a random settlement account. You reverse the payroll entry, or you repay to the same entity that issued it through the documented channel. This was neither. I didn't forward it. I didn't print it. I didn't walk it over to anyone. I replied again, even shorter. I will not wire funds to a non-payroll settlement account. Please open an overpayment case and provide controller approval for any deviation from standard reversal. That was all. I sent it at 9:52. At 10:06, my calendar refreshed on its own. A meeting appeared. Quick sync, compensation issue. 10:30 a.m. Attendees. Jared, HR generalist. Finance ops lead. No agenda. At 10:08, another meeting appeared right after it. Follow-up. Compliance. 11mm attendees. Jared, HR, Mason Kerrigan. Mason didn't do quick syncs. Mason did budget reviews, exec briefings, board prep. He was now on my calendar like he'd been waiting. I didn't freak out. I didn't shut my laptop and run to the bathroom like a teenager. I opened the Treasury portal again and checked if I still had access. I did, for now. So I pulled one more thing I knew I'd regret not pulling later. The bank file metadata. The funding file that had been sent to the bank, the one that pulled money from that restricted account and pushed it through payroll. It showed who initiated it, who approved it, and when. Initiated Treasury analyst, name blurred behind role permissions, approved Mason Kerrigan. And then I noticed something small that made my skin crawl. The file wasn't created through our standard payroll funding template. It was created as a manual transfer with a payroll reference attached, meaning someone built a path that looked like payroll, but wasn't payroll. At 10:14, my Slack started popping. A teammate message, "Hey man, are you okay? HR's asking about you." Another, "Finance is in war room, something about a bonus issue." By 10:20, it wasn't just my problem anymore. It was circulating, quietly like smoke in vents. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Because at 10:22, my access to the Treasury portal to kick me out mid-refresh. A red banner flashed across the screen. Permission denied. I tried again. Same thing. I sat back in my chair and felt the exact moment the company decided I wasn't a person anymore. I was a risk. At 10:25, Jared walked back to my desk, but this time he wasn't alone. The HR generalist was with him, holding a folder like a prop. Jared didn't smile. "We need you in a room," he said. I stood up slowly, grabbed my notebook, not my laptop, and followed them. Because I already knew what this was. When you can't control the facts, you control the person holding them. And if they were willing to strip my access before even talking to me, then the meeting wasn't about fixing a mistake. It was about choosing who would wear it. They took me to a small conference room near HR. Glass walls, no windows. A table wiped so clean it looked unused. The HR generalist sat first. Jared chose the chair beside the door, not across from me. That alone told me this wasn't a conversation, it was containment. Thank you for meeting on short notice, HR said, placing a folder on the table. A bonus was paid to you in error. We need to resolve the overpayment today. I'm not refusing to resolve it, I said. I'm asking for the standard reversal. She opened the folder and slid out the form they'd emailed. My name, $30,000 in bold, and a paragraph authorizing repayment, plus deductions from future wages if I didn't return the funds immediately. Signature line at the bottom. Sign this, she said, then wire the funds back using finance's instructions. No, I said, not to that account. Jared's voice stayed controlled, but it lost warmth. Ethan, it's a company account. Just send it back. It's labeled settlement, I said. If this is an overpayment, open a case. Payroll can reverse it or document a repayment schedule. I'm not wiring money to a settlement account because someone wants it done quietly. HR's eyes narrowed. Where did you get the account details? In writing, I said. From finance ops. Jared glanced at her like, he's not bluffing. HR tried a different angle. You understand internal financial information is sensitive. I understand my job, I said, and I understand this is not how legitimate corrections are handled. Jared leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You return the funds today. If you don't, we escalate. Escalate didn't mean paperwork. It meant consequences. I looked at the form again. It wasn't just about repayment. It was an admission. It turned a system action into personal misconduct. Mine. Put it in the case, I said. Controller approval. Legal sign-off if you're deviating. I'll follow policy. At 10:58, the door opened without a knock. Mason Kerrigan stepped in, VP of Finance. Crisp suit, calm expression like he'd walked into a board meeting, not an HR room. He didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table and looked at me like I was a number that wouldn't reconcile. Ethan, he said, this shouldn't be complicated. You received funds you weren't entitled to. Return them today. I will return them through the documented process, I said. I will not wire them to a settlement account without a case number and controller approval. Mason's gaze sharpened. You're in compensation ops. You know how this works. I do, I said. That's why I'm saying this is wrong. HR started to speak, but Mason lifted a hand and she stopped mid-breath. Let's be clear, Mason said, and if you don't return the funds today, we will treat it as willful retention of company property. It was a script, a path they'd already prepared. I didn't raise my voice. I asked one question, quiet, specific, unavoidable. What was the source account? Jared's head snapped toward me. Mason held my stare for a beat. Irrelevant. It's not, I said. The source determines the remediation. If funding came from a restricted account, you can't fix it with a quiet wire. You fix it with an audit-backed reversal and documented correction. The room went still. Mason's expression didn't crack, but something behind it tightened. You don't have access to that information. I had view access, I said, until it was revoked this morning. Jared jumped in too fast. It was revoked because you were looking at things you shouldn't. I was looking at a transaction tied to my pay, I said. That's not misconduct. That's diligence. Mason's jaw flexed once. Then he turned to HR. Place him on administrative leave, he said. Effective immediately. Collect his equipment. HR nodded like she'd been waiting for permission. Ethan, this is a standard step while we investigate. Standard. Another word used to make a pressure move sound neutral. They walked me back to my desk. People looked up, then looked away. HR stayed close enough that I couldn't send messages without it being obvious. It arrived with a plastic bin and a checklist. Laptop and badge, the tech said, eyes down. I handed them over without a scene. A scene would give them a reason. Silence forced them to rely on their paperwork. At home, I laid everything out on my kitchen table. The finance chain, the HR form, the screenshots I'd taken before access was cut, the PDF with Kerrigan Holdings, settlement, and my notes from the meeting with exact times. On my personal email, another message arrived before noon, this time from legal, copied to HR. Do not delete or alter any company records, it said. Do not discuss this matter with employees. Further instructions to follow. They weren't treating this like an overpayment. They were treating it like an incident. A minute later, Finance Ops emailed again, as if nothing had happened. Reminder, wire return requested by 5 p.m. Failure to return may be escalated. Same script, new deadline. I called my bank and asked a simple question. Could the company pull the money back without me? The rep explained it the way banks always do. Careful, neutral, procedural. A deposit could be reversed only if it was processed as an ACH reversal within specific rules and timeframes initiated by the originator. A random wire from me was not correction. It was me choosing to move funds. Leave it untouched, she said, almost like advice. If it's an error, they can correct it through their bank. I hung up and stared at the balance again. $30,000 sitting there like a lit match. I also wrote down Mason's exact phrasing, word for word, because later, people forget. That was the moment I stopped trying to be liked. I started acting like someone who might be questioned under oath. Then I opened the compliance portal we were trained on once a year and quietly discouraged from ever touching. It asked for categories: fraud, misuse of funds, retaliation, accounting irregularity. I didn't accuse anyone of a crime. I wrote facts. A bonus funded from a restricted account shown in Treasury. Pressure to wire money to a settlement account. Immediate access revocation and administrative leave after I requested policy-based correction. I attached the evidence. When I hit submit, it generated a case number and a single line. Internal audit will review and contact you if additional information is needed. I memorized the case number, because if they were moving this fast to silence me, then someone else was moving fast to erase the trail. Tuesday morning, I woke up to the kind of quiet that makes you check your phone before you even sit up. No missed calls, no new threats, no follow-up. Just one calendar notification, automated from HR. Administrative leave check-in. Tuesday. It felt less like support and more like a leash. I didn't spend the morning spiraling. I did 2 practical things. First, I moved the $30,000 into a separate sub-account inside my bank. Still in my name, still traceable, but isolated so I couldn't accidentally spend it. The bank rep had told me to leave it untouched. I did exactly that, in the most transparent way possible. Second, I contacted an employment attorney for a short consult, not because I wanted to sue, because I wanted someone to tell me what this looked like from the outside, with no corporate loyalty fogging the view. He listened quietly while I walked through the timeline. When I mentioned the settlement account label and the immediate leave after I asked for the funding source, he stopped me. Do not wire anything to an account they provided, he said. If it was a payroll error, they can reverse it through proper channels. If they're pressuring you to wire, it's because the reversal creates a trail they don't want. That matched exactly what my stomach had been saying since Monday. At 11:34, an email hit my personal inbox from HR. Subject, next steps, overpayment recovery. It was written like a script with legal glue. They demanded I return the funds via wire by 5 p.m. again. They attached the repayment authorization form again, and they added a new sentence. Failure to comply may be reported as misappropriation. I stared at that word. Misappropriation is what they call theft when they want to sound like they're doing you a favor by not calling the police. I forwarded the entire thread to my attorney. Then I replied to HR with one sentence. I will cooperate fully through documented payroll reversal or an HR overpayment case. I will not wire funds to a non-payroll settlement account. No emotion, no debate, just a refusal framed as compliance. At 12:07, Mason emailed me directly for the first time. Subject, final request. His tone was calm, almost paternal. Ethan, this can be resolved quickly. Return the funds today and we'll close this matter. If you continue to resist, we will proceed accordingly. Proceed accordingly. That phrase doesn't mean policy. It means power. At 12:22, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. Ethan, a woman said, "This is Lila from Internal Audit." My pulse didn't spike. It dropped, like a machine finally finding the right gear. "I received your report," she said. "I have a few questions. Can you talk now?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it. She didn't ask me how I felt. She asked me what I saw. What system showed the funding source? Do you have a screenshot? When was your access revoked? Who instructed you to wire funds, and to what account name? Did anyone mention the word restricted or trust in writing? I answered carefully, exactly. I told her I had screenshots from before access was removed. I told her the account label. I told her Mason's name appeared as the approver in the audit log. I told her the destination account name on the wire instructions. She didn't react like a shocked person. She reacted like someone building a file. "Do not move those funds out of your control," she said. "Do not wire them. Leave them isolated and untouched." "Already done," I said. There was a small pause, like she'd just ticked a box. "And Ethan," she added, "do not communicate with finance by phone. Email only." Then she said something that made the room around me feel colder, even though I was alone. "We're implementing a hold on certain treasury actions." After the call, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the wall for a full minute. Because holds don't get placed over small mistakes. Holds get placed when someone is worried money is still moving. At 1:41, my former teammate pinged me on my personal phone. "Just one message, bro. CFO just pulled Treasury and Audit into a closed meeting. Mason looks bad." I didn't respond. I didn't want messages I couldn't explain later. At 2:00, I joined the HR check-in from my phone. Video off, audio on. HR sounded softer than yesterday. That shift in tone is never kindness. It's recalibration. "Ethan," she said, "we want to resolve this constructively. Are you willing to return the overpayment today?" "I'm willing to resolve it through documented payroll reversal or an HR case," I said. "I am not wiring funds to a settlement account." A new voice joined the call, someone I didn't recognize at first. "This is Daniel, corporate counsel," he said. "Legal." "Ethan," Daniel said, "we're trying to avoid escalation. Returning the funds demonstrates good faith." "Good faith is process," I said. "If it's a payroll error, reverse it. If it's an overpayment, open a case. You're asking me to move money to an account labeled settlement without controller approval in writing." Silence. Then Daniel said carefully, "Where did you see the source account?" I didn't take the bait. I didn't explain the whole Treasury portal. I didn't brag about screenshots. "I have documentation," I said. "Internal Audit already has it." That sentence changed the temperature. HR cleared her throat. "Internal Audit?" Daniel didn't speak for a moment. When he did, his voice had a different edge, like he'd switched from persuasion to damage control. "Ethan, you filed a report?" "Yes," I said. Another pause. Then he said, "Okay, we're going to suspend direct recovery efforts pending review. You'll remain on leave while we sort this out." So fast, so clean, like they'd been racing toward 5 p.m. until they realized someone else had joined the race. The call ended with forced politeness. "We'll be in touch. Thank you for your cooperation." When it disconnected, I sat there and felt something I hadn't let myself feel yet. Anger, not explosive anger, the kind that makes you stop negotiating. Because I understood the shape of what was happening. They weren't trying to correct a bonus mistake. They were trying to make me the person who returned it. So the original funding path could be dismissed as a simple error. But once audit had my screenshots, once legal heard the words restricted account and settlement wire in the same case, they couldn't close it with a quiet email anymore. At 4:09, I got a new email, no subject line, just a forwarded thread from my old teammate, sent to me by mistake, then immediately followed by "ignore that." But I'd already seen the first line. From CFO to Legal Internal Audit Treasury. Effective immediately, freeze all discretionary transfers connected to the client trust holdback. We have an issue. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. I saved it. because that one sentence meant the game had changed, and Mason wasn't the one writing the rules anymore. Wednesday morning, I got an email from internal audit with an actual subject line, an actual ticket number, and language that sounded like someone who expected their words to be read in a deposition. Subject: IA case. Request for interview and documentation. They weren't asking me to return money. They were asking me to confirm facts. The interview was scheduled for 10 a.m. Video on. Recording enabled. Corporate counsel present. I dressed like I was going to court, not because I'm dramatic, but because appearances matter when people are looking for the easiest person to blame. At 9:58, my laptop chimed. The call opened. Lila from audit was there, Daniel from legal was there, and a man I hadn't seen before. Older, quiet, a posture that said CFO office without saying it. "This is Martin," Daniel said. "Finance leadership." He didn't introduce himself as VP. He didn't smile. Lila started exactly where a real audit starts. Scope. "Ethan, we're reviewing a potential misclassification of funds and an attempted off-process recovery," she said. "We want you to walk us through the timeline from the deposit to your administrative leave." I did not embellish. I did not guess motives. I didn't say the word fraud. I read my notes like a pilot reading a checklist. Friday, 7:42 p.m. Deposit received and payroll shows it as retention bonus. Monday, 8:17 a.m. Finance ops emails demanding same-day wire return. Monday, 8:31 a.m. Wire instructions provided. Destination labeled Kerrigan Holdings. Settlement. Monday, 10:22 a.m. My Treasury View access revoked mid-session. Monday, 11 a.m. Mason attends meeting. Threat of misappropriation placed on leave. Tuesday, repeated wire demands. I refuse. Audit contacts me. Legal stops recovery efforts after learning of IA case. Then I shared my screen and showed the evidence. One file at a time. Not a slideshow, just raw proof. The Treasury screenshot showing the source account label. The payroll audit log showing Mason's approval line. The PDF with the settlement destination. The HR form with the disciplinary language. The email where finance says standard workflow takes too long. Lila didn't react emotionally. She asked verification questions. Is this screenshot time-stamped? Yes. You can see the system time in the corner. Was this access granted as part of your reconciliation duties? Yes. View only. No initiation rights. Did anyone ever provide written controller approval for a settlement wire? No. Daniel's face stayed neutral until the settlement PDF came back on screen. He leaned in slightly, small movement, but it was the first time he showed anything. Martin, finance leadership, said nothing for most of it. Then very quietly, he asked one question. Ethan, did you ever request a retention bonus? No, I said. Did you ever receive a written notice that you were eligible? No. He nodded once, like that answered more than it should. Lila ended the interview with instructions that sounded like a lock clicking into place. You will keep the funds isolated and untouched. You will not wire or transfer them. The company will issue formal instructions through payroll once we complete review. After the call, I sat there and waited for the adrenaline crash. It didn't come. Instead, I felt calm. Because for the first time since Monday, the story wasn't being told by the people pressuring me. It was being told by documents. At 2:16 p.m., my phone rang. Jared, I didn't pick up. He texted instead. Can we talk? This got bigger than I thought. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. At 4:03 p.m., HR emailed. Subject. Update. Administrative leave status. 2 sentences. Your administrative leave remains in effect. You are not to contact finance, treasury, or HR representatives outside approved channels. The tone wasn't threatening anymore. It was defensive. Because they were no longer managing me. They were managing exposure. The next morning, Thursday, I got a call from my attorney. They're going to try to close this without admitting intent, he said. They'll call it misrouting and procedural deviation. That's fine. Your goal is not to force a confession. Your goal is to avoid being tagged as the actor. Around noon, internal audit emailed again. Subject: IA case, already, AHAS, resolution actions. This one was short, clinical, and devastating in its own way. Treasury had implemented new dual control restrictions on restricted accounts. Any transfers out of client trust holdbacks required CFO legal approval. A third-party review of bonus funding activity had been initiated. Direct recovery attempts from employees were suspended pending remediation. That last bullet was the cleanest confirmation I could have asked for. They were admitting in corporate language that what they tried to make me do was wrong. At 3:27 p.m., another message came through, not from HR, from Martin. Subject: request for call one line. Ethan, I'd like to speak for 5 minutes. You can have counsel present. That's the kind of sentence people send when they're trying to prevent you from becoming a bigger problem than the person they're about to sacrifice. I joined the call with my attorney on the line. Martin spoke first. I'm going to be direct, he said. We reviewed the records. The bonus payment to you was not authorized under the retention program. I never claimed it was, I said. He paused like he hadn't expected that. We are going to correct it through payroll reversal, he continued. You will receive a formal notice and a repayment schedule option if needed. You will not be asked to wire to any settlement account. I let him finish. I didn't thank him. Then he said the part that actually mattered. Mason Kerrigan is no longer with the company. He didn't say terminated. He didn't say resigned. He said no longer with. In corporate life, that's a body hitting the floor without the sound. And Jared? I asked, before I could stop myself. Martin exhaled once. Your manager's under review for process violations. That's all I can say. My attorney didn't let me talk more than necessary. He asked 2 questions. Will Ethan's record reflect misconduct? And will Ethan be paid during leave? Martin answered both clearly. No misconduct designation. Full pay through reinstatement. The call ended. When it did, I sat at my kitchen table and finally let my shoulders drop. Because the satisfaction wasn't keeping the $30,000. The satisfaction was something cleaner. They tried to turn me into the person who made the money disappear. Instead, I became the person who forced it to be seen. 2 weeks later, I went back to work. Not to Jared's team. Not under the same chain. They moved me under internal controls. A new role they created fast, like buying insurance after a fire. On my first day back, I walked past the conference room where HR tried to get me to sign that form. The glass walls were the same, the table was the same, but the people weren't. And the system access request I received that afternoon, auto-approved by the CFO's office, had a new note attached. Dual control required. Audit visibility enabled. I stared at it for a moment, then closed the ticket. Because that was the real end of the story. Not revenge, not shouting, not a dramatic takedown. Just a quiet shift of power, back to process, back to evidence. And the knowledge that when someone tells you, just wire it back today, what they're really asking is, will you help me erase this? I didn't.